Welcome to Unsilent with your hosts Dave and Brian. This is not another current events podcast. We're digging deeper, diagnosing, and discussing what's really going on today, how we got here, and providing observations for future generations.
Welcome to Unsilent. We're Brian and Dave, and we'd love to hear where you think we're getting it right and where you think we just don't know what we're talking about. You can do that on unsilentpodcast.com or on Rumble comment section or other social media channels. Hey, Brian, what's new?
Well, it seems like we're in this period now where there's a million things going on and nothing's going on. It seems like it's kind of all that at once.
Yeah, it's I mean, we got the tariffs, we got the economic news and all of that, but nothing is concluded, and there doesn't seem to be. The thing that's most frustrating about this time, in my opinion, is we don't really have a clear direction on what we're trying to do as a country. It's like, we're doing this and we're doing. I mean, so the numbers on immigration, stellar. I mean, great, fantastic. So that worked out well. But the economic news, the tariff news, the Russia, Ukraine, Russia doesn't seem to be interested in stopping the war. I mean, Hamas has still got a hostage. I mean, Houthis are still shooting at people. Iran, they're a bunch of jerks. I mean, it's just like we got all.
Well, what's fascinating about I think immigration is like the one thing that people point to and say, hey, this thing is done or going well or like whatever, right?
Yeah.
However, I think across the board, I agree with you. Like I think I mentioned a few months ago, like I wish we had some kind of intermediate, 100-year plan. Like hey, here's what we're aiming for, that kind of thing. Right. And you said I would have to be a dictator. I think is what you said. I'd have to be a dictator to pull that off. So it feels to me like there's a lot of things happening, but it's all to stop things, not to do things.
Yeah.
We're doing tariffs to stop the unfair trade balance. The immigration stuff is to stop the overflow of illegal migrant, illegal aliens coming. So all these things are things to stop things. And unless these things are cauterized, they can just be undone with a wave of a pen in 3.5 years or 4 years or whatever. So, but on the immigration thing specifically, I find it super fascinating. I think there's been now 2 federal lawmakers who have flown to El Salvador to go up to the prison gate and knock on the door and have cameras rolling and demand that these people be let go. I find that so fascinating. And part of it is I find it fascinating that the hills people are choosing to die on.
Yeah.
And I find it fascinating that politicians to get elected, they have to have publicity.
Yeah.
So I would think that if they had done similar kinds of things for other ideals that would be more favorably looked upon, there would have been cameras rolling for those things too.
Yeah.
But there's not this plethora of so-and-so legislator went to, the Make-A-Wish Foundation or the Children's Hospital to solve a problem there. They choose this stuff. So it's this weird symbolism kind of what fights they're willing to really go all in on. I find that bizarre and super fascinating.
Well, it's very bizarre because I don't think anybody, I mean, it's not a winning issue for them. I mean, it's just, I don't see how they can be. I mean, you could fly to Israel and stand on the Gaza border and say release the hostage, release the hostages. That would have some support. But this, like in El Salvador, MS-13 gang member, they're trying to paint him as this nice, he's basically Ward Cleaver living in,
he's just a family man. Come on,
just a family man, yeah, family man held unjustly in El Salvador. He was illegal. He was El Salvador, and I mean, but I understand, and I'm very cynical about how politicians choose things, but usually you can see why they do. It's like, okay, we're going to go get these people out of jail because they were just jailed because they're, the wrong race or something like that. You can at least see the rationale behind it. I just do not see the rationale behind that.
I have a theory. I have a theory for you, Dave, but I'm reluctant to share it because it's super cynical. Like it is really cynical.
I'm at a logical theory, so hit me.
My theory is that the criteria for how they decide this stuff is all about making themselves look good, not the collective good of the populace.
Sure.
So I start with
that's
that.
for sure.
And I think that's something we can all agree upon.
Yeah.
And I think the next level of criteria would be what would give me the most bang with the least amount of risk. So if you went to Iran, there's like real risk. They might actually like put you in jail or execute you.
Yeah, exactly.
I don't think there's been a whole lot of that in El Salvador in the
No,
current moment. Like they're pretty friendly towards the U.S. and they probably look at this as like a goof more than anything, right?
Right. Yes.
So I think when you smash those two things together, what gets me the most status, me the most appearance that I'm, the righteous one here, and what can I do that puts me in the least amount of harm to get the most visibility? I think that's how you land on going to an El Salvadorian prison.
Yeah, I mean that's true. I think all that no, the calculation is right. My question is though, the visibility. I mean, who is he going to incrementally influence to contribute to his reelection campaign with that visibility? I mean,
But hold on. That introduces a third criteria, which is you and I have this archaic notion that we elect people to represent us. The people who are flying to El Salvador believe they are in a position to educate us.
Yeah. Well, okay. So in other words, he's flying there to bring attention to this family man who was unjustly
Yeah.
shipped off to a foreign country, and and so his calculus is then that he's trying to help us respond in a righteous way, and that will help him.
I think that what he's probably again super cynical, but I think that it looks risky enough. Like if you like the History Channel or something like that has this thing of like the top 10 most dangerous prisons in the world.
Sure.
I'm gonna guess this is one of them probably,
Sure.
right? So you could plausibly make a case that he's going to this ultra dangerous place, even though you and I know on the outside of the prison in El Salvador, a very U.S. friendly country, reasonably safe, right? But the appearance is it's very dangerous. This guy's risking it all. He's risking his life to go do this thing.
Sure.
And in the hopes of, if people say, oh my gosh, this guy's risking his life to do this, it must be a really important thing. I should rethink that because his purpose, he believes, is to educate us, not represent us.
So this is kind of like when Hillary Clinton said she was in a helicopter that got shot at, and all like, and we found out it wasn't really true. So it's like.
Well, I think that's more just like plain old fashioned political lying.
Well, yeah, I mean, that's part of the course.
You got to embellish. It's no different than Tim Walz saying he was in Tiananmen Square when he wasn't. I mean, it's just,
exactly.
Pick these historical moments with. Yeah, they pick historical moments where people actually were brave in situations and they put themselves there artificially and hoping to carry all the weight from it.
Well, and you see, so let's just stipulate that everything you just said is actually what's happening. It still doesn't make any sense because he doesn't understand the public at all. He doesn't understand. I mean, there's 20% of the people that will probably say, "Oh, yes, righteous Democrat is supporting the brown person or something," and I mean, so that's what you're going to get from.
Right, but people who are deeply religious. I mean, I get occasionally I get my front door gets knocked on.
Sure.
By religious groups who are very fine people that are trying to enlighten me, and they've been given directives by whomever they listen to, whether it's be in this world or another, to go out and convert people.
Sure.
And they believe wholeheartedly in what they're doing. And I think they're oftentimes very, very kind people and very nice people.
Sure,
and they're in a vast minority, of these particular religious ideologies and things like that. Doesn't make them bad people.
Right.
But my point is, if you have religious fervor, you don't have to have a majority.
Well, yes, and so that then goes to what we've talked about before, that this, that politics for a certain number of people has become a substitute religion, and therefore whatever so that would put this particular, it's a senator, I believe, as a basically a bishop or something in the church of the woke angries or something of that.
Yeah. I have a few things that I've saved here. Before we get to that, I've been kind of out of touch with the news for the last couple weeks. So but I keep hearing about this civil war in the Democrat Party. Can you just like walk me through give me the 2 to 3 minute version of
Sure.
what's going on. I mean, I'm aware you have like ultra progressive like Bernie Sanders and AOC, and then you got more middle of that's been around for a couple hundred years at this point. Whatever
Yeah.
party is, you've got people who are more at extreme and more centrist. I get that part, but what's the part that I wouldn't know having not paid attention to the news for a
Well,
couple weeks?
I mean, at the end of the day, what it is, it's the pragmatists who realize that the country is not with them versus the ideologues who are like, you scum sucking, people that don't care about the people you're supposed to care about. You need to get in line. So, I mean, so it is ultimately, so it's, you've got like Gavin Newsom, and you've got in this state, oddly enough, so far at least, Bob Ferguson, the governor of Washington State, that I didn't vote for, and he seems to be so far like holding the line on the insane state budget. So you've got some pragmatists who are basically like, look, dudes, we're dying on hills that are not going to get us anywhere, and we're going to be out of power, and so stop it, even if you don't believe it. And there's other people, the AOCs of the world and the Bernie Sanders and other people of that nature who are true. I mean, I've said this before. Props to Bernie that he seems to really believe his own demented stuff. I
Yeah,
mean, he's wrong on basically whenever he opens his mouth, he both looks like a crazy uncle and a lunatic that's wrong about everything.
yeah.
But props to him that he goes along with what he supports what he believes. So I think it's the pragmatists versus the ideologues, and that's where the civil war is. So the one
Okay.
of the things I saw just before we got on, there's around this battle is they put the vice chair of the National DNC party is David Hogg. You remember him, David
Yeah.
Hogg,
Yeah.
who
Yeah.
has no capability, from what I can tell, no natural leadership
It's like a
capability.
one trick pony, right? Gun controls his thing, and he has no real expertise outside that, right?
Yeah, he is. Yeah, he's young. He has no expertise on anything. He's got some media presence. He's more of a YouTube star than he is, or a TikTok
He's like an
star.
influencer more than a party support party builder kind of guy or
Yeah,
whatever.
yeah. I don't think he understands the inner workings of any of that. But so there's this battle for control between those two. Now the so that is fundamentally what's going on. It's the pragmatists versus the ideologues, and the question will be. So there's probably about 6 months before the midterms heat up in real strong fashion, and so we'll see in that period of time which camp really wins. Now, if Trump continues to do the things without very much explanation, like the yesterday Carney got elected as the Prime Minister of Canada, who's a WEF trained, basically socialist. A completely, I mean, it's just so upsetting, honestly, Brian. Especially now, you don't live next to Canada anymore. You live next to Mexico now, but
Right.
now I still live next to Canada up here, and
I just traded one cartel for another. It's okay.
yeah, yes, exactly. Well, and so I heard, I think it was Ben Shapiro call Carney an ugly Justin Trudeau. So he's basically the same thing as Trudeau,
Yeah.
just this banker guy but Trump installed him. I mean, Trump put him in office. Trump put Carney in office. Pierre Poilievre would have been a great person to have as a good neighbor. We could have negotiated with him. Our security situation would have been better. Everything would have been better. But so if we have
How
some,
did Trump? Okay, two questions in. How did Trump install him, and why? Again, forgive me. I've been out of the news loop
yeah.
for a couple weeks, so I'm not. I don't have any of this stuff. So, how did Trump install him, and then why?
Well, so basically, um, Carney didn't run against Pierre Poilievre. He ran against Trump. He literally said his entire campaign was, "We're not going to become the 51st state. We're going to fight Donald Trump. We're going to fight America. We're going to." I mean, so all of his everything he was talking about was fighting Donald Trump. Because I mean, look, it's like somebody coming in and saying, "Brian, yeah, I know you like your family. It's a nice family, but we're taking over. You're done.
Yeah, yeah, yeah,
We're it's not Hardy anymore. Now it's Parkhurst. There you go. You're done.
yeah, yeah.
Get used to it."
Okay,
So,
yeah,
and then of course punishing tariffs on our largest trading partner, who happens to be our next door neighbor, who happens to border the Arctic Circle, which is a really critical security situation for us, driving.
I got you. So he unintentionally put him in place, is what you're saying, not intentionally.
Totally unintentionally.
Oh, gotcha. Okay, I got you. Okay.
Yes.
Okay.
I say euphemistically installed him because it's not.
Yeah. I thought maybe there was he was tweeting something and saying like, hey, something that riled people enough where they elect. I mean, I didn't think that you meant like he wanted this guy to be elected, but like he had done some actions. Okay, now I'm tracking. Okay.
Well, and even see the day before, Trump repeated on Truth Social that we need to. He said basically, there's only one man that can save Canada, and I'm that man. So Trump said he basically. Awesome. Yeah, I mean, it's just like, dude.
Again, I wouldn't want him to say that if I lived in Canada, but it's comical. You have to find things to laugh at this moment.
And I laughed about the whole 51st state thing and American maple syrup and all that, but now it's come at a real cost, and it basically it's not a Make America First thing, it's not a Make America Great thing, it's not an America First proposition. It's basically a China and Europe first proposition, because it puts Canada in more of a position where they want to negotiate with other people, not us. So, but my point is, in all of that little rabbit trail I went down about Canada, the point of that is that we have about 6 months to get some clarity about things, maybe less than that, because the numbers that just came out, the economic numbers just came out, were not exciting at all. I mean,
they're horrible.
Yeah, it's just, we have one more quarter like that, and we are officially in recession.
Well, hold on. Now we changed the definition of recession like 4 years ago, so we can't cling to this now. You can't go back and forth, Dave.
Yeah, I know this whole thing about consistency and logic is overrated. I realize.
Yeah. My theory, as you know, is that we're already in a recession. We just don't know it yet. And I don't, again, I'm not an economist, but I'm using different different equations than they are, but you can
slice it. Either way you slice
people are spending differently than they were 18 months ago, a year ago, 100%. 9 months ago.
100%.
Yeah, we're in it. We just don't have the there's been I've mentioned some of the leading indicators that fired off in 2024. Some of them as early as July, I think. Then don't forget we had the SVB collapse, and big bank collapses are always indicative, and that happened 2-3 years ago now. We bailed them out, of course, because that's what we're in the bank bailout business. That's what we do. But the problems that led to that have not been resolved.
Right. Not by any stretch. Not by any stretch.
So whatever undercurrent there is that caused that is still there. We just threw in typical American 21st century fashion, we just threw a bunch of money at it and crossed our fingers and kicked the can down the road for the next guy to deal with.
Right.
But the consequences, gravity always wins. The consequences are still coming.
Absolutely. There's no doubt. And the question is, soft landing, hard landing, no landing at all. All of that is, and there is a chance that we can, smooth out the glide path a little bit if there is some kind of consistency in American economic and foreign policy. If that happens, it doesn't eliminate the dangers, the risks, and the structural failures. We still have $37 trillion in debt.
Right. Let me ask you a question, Dave. Would it be fair to say, for those of you listening who are maybe just tuning in or haven't listened a whole lot before, Dave and I are doing this podcast to explain to future generations what this moment in time is like. We're talking to a fictitious guy we made up called Kenny G, who will be middle-aged around the year 2070, 2090, somewhere in there. And Dave and I are trying to explain to Kenny G, that person we're talking to, things that won't be picked up in the history books. So we're not trying to capture every significant thing that happens. We talk about those things, but we're trying to capture the mood and things like that. So my question for you, Dave, is, would it be fair to say to Kenny G that really we have 4 political parties right now, because we have civil war in the Democrat Party, and I would argue we have a civil war in the Republican Party.
Sure.
It feels to me like we have four fairly equal parties as far as like no one of those four parties has the majority.
Right.
No one of those four parties has control over really anything.
Right.
And it does feel like we're just on a hamster wheel doing a lot of stuff, which some of these things I strongly agree with.
Yeah.
But even whether I agree with them or not, these things are temporary so far. They're executive orders and executive actions that could be undone,
easily.
As soon as Trump isn't president anymore, the next president could undo many or all of them. So we're doing a lot of things that some feel good in the moment, some don't. But it's nothing permanent, and we're not really gaining traction on anything other than we closed the border. That for sure we could say. But even that, as we mentioned, there's people flying to El Salvador now to lobby for not having the border closed and whatever.
Right.
Does that feel like a fair assessment to you? We have like four
absolutely.
political parties.
Yeah, well, four political parties with the majority on the outside. So in other words, there's these kind of four. So there's there's each of the four that you mentioned, and then there's everybody else, which is probably the majority of actual numbers of people that are on the outside who are just like, why is all this happening? Why, can't we get something together? Can't we, I don't, I'm not involved in all this. I just want to work and have a life.
Right.
And,
I think if you put together the centrist Democrats and the centrist Republicans, you would probably have the majority of the U.S. population represented there.
And they're kind of on the centrists are on the outside.
Yes,
that's true.
So, but the centrists in both parties are not in. They don't get the fundraising. They don't get the whatever. Right. So it feels like if you put those two camps together, you would have a pretty decent representation of the majority of the population of the country. However, neither of those camps can deviate to the other side, like crossing the political aisle, Democrat to Republican or vice versa. Right. So the chances of that centrist group unifying are like next to zero.
No. Well, no, they can't. They're not going to unify. They can't unify. I mean, there's all these. There's been all these attempts at Purple Nation stuff. Where you get and I applaud those because at some point you've got to get along with your neighbors, even if your neighbor doesn't believe everything you believe. You got to get along with them and say, okay, well, you can believe this and I'll believe that, and I'm not going to hit you and you're not going to hit me, and we're going to do all the things we agreed together to do, but not going to do these things. So that's fine. But if you're in a situation where there's every negative impulse is amplified, and people are on the corner screaming fascist every day, then no, we can't make any real progress. It's hard to do. Now you could say, I'll give you this caveat to that though. You could say that during about the first 100 days, we just finished 100 days of Trump being in office, so there was sort of a honeymoon period. Now that was it. We're through with the honeymoon period right now, and during that first 100 days, lots of people would go along with things that now they're like, I'm not as sanguine about this as I was in March. I was sanguine about this back then, but now I'm a little concerned. So you're now in real world land.
Yeah, I would agree with that. So one of the things that I saw, it's a pretty obscure story, but you and I have talked about this a few times. I would play the clip, but the audio is really, really bad. It's there's a bunch of media people in a cabinet meeting. So Trump has his full cabinet there, and I think this was today, it might have been yesterday as we're recording this. A reporter asked him, Trump, with his full cabinet there, basically something like, you're facing a lot of headwinds from various parties, hinting at like judges and things like that, like slowing you down, stopping you, things like that. What are you going to do, basically, right?
Right.
And Trump didn't say the words habeas corpus, but he said, well, there's some things we can do that have been done by 3 presidents before that are very popular presidents. Some would say the greatest presidents ever, like that Trump, you got to throw the Trumpisms in there, right?
Yeah.
We don't want to do that stuff, but they're very powerful and very good presidents that we all look back on fondly have done this thing. He doesn't say the words habeas corpus, but he's hinting at it. So a couple things. One, I thought Lincoln was the only one that did this. I didn't realize FDR did it also.
No, I didn't. FDR did it. When did he?
And Grant did also.
Really?
So think about this, Dave. Lincoln and Grant bookend the fourth turning of the Civil War era.
Yes.
And FDR, because of his 4 terms, was like through the meat of the fourth turning in the World War II Depression era.
Yep.
I found that super fascinating that this has been done 3 times before. both in the 3 times encompassing large amounts of time of those fourth turning areas. What do you think?
Well, first of all, I didn't realize that. I didn't realize that FDR in particular suspended habeas corpus. Lincoln's the very famous
Now,
politician.
again, I'm reading this on the internet, so it can all be crap. I don't know. The person who posted this on Twitter or X now, fairly credible, does his
Yeah.
homework. He's not just like a guy who spews stuff. On the other hand, he's not a constitutional scholar either, so I'd take it with a grain of salt. But
But it would make sense, though. I mean, it would make sense because habeas corpus. I mean, it's a Latin phrase. I mean, it's an institutional phrase by the very nature of the thing, very philosophical, etc. And in as a piece of a system, and in fourth turnings, systems have collapsed. That's the
right,
whole thing. That's the whole vibe of the fourth turning is everything. Nothing works that worked before because we've gone through 80 years since the last structural remodel, if you will, and here we
yeah.
are again. So it makes sense that in a fourth turning you're going to have certain institutional norms, even the most sacred and sacrosanct ones, to collapse. So it certainly makes sense.
So what? So you giving us kind of an abstract definition. What does habeas corpus mean for those of us who don't know?
So it's basically, let me give you the better definition because I'm going to give you a butchered definition. Bear with me for one moment. So, uh, so basically, it means you should. Here's the Latin. Here's the actual Latin. You should have the body. It's a fundamental legal procedure that protects individuals against unlawful detention or imprisonment. So
Yeah.
basically, that's why I wanted to look up the actual phrase: unlawful detention or imprisonment.
Well, so that makes sense. Then they might be what he might be citing is FDR did with the Japanese internment camps. That might have been
Yes.
a
Yeah.
version of it.
Yeah. That makes sense. That must be it. In fact, that must be it because that's the um yeah, that's got to be it. That makes sense now.
And Lincoln did it for the people who wouldn't let the slaves go, basically,
Right.
right?
Right.
Yeah. So, I mean, he put people in prison for not upholding the 14th Amendment or whatever. Well, forgive me, I don't know, 13th Amendment, whichever one it was, when he did the Gettysburg Address and
Right.
said, all made the declaration that we don't have slaves anymore. And
Right.
some people said, yeah, pound sand, we're keeping them. And many of those people went to jail rather than
Yeah. Yeah.
and there
Exactly.
was a whole lot of due process with that. There's like, okay,
Yes.
you're keeping your slaves, we're putting you in jail. All right.
Yeah.
So
Full
it's
due
it's
process.
that due process and not being the individual not being crushed by the big government or the society at large or whatever.
Right. And you have the right to it basically is the suspension of due process. You have the right to have a jury of your peers. You have the right to you've got in these days Miranda, right? You've got a whole bunch of rights that protect you from unlawfully being arrested and detained. And that certainly, now that you say that about the Japanese internment, that makes perfect sense because that was a suspension of their habeas
Sure.
corpus rights.
Yeah, for sure. Well, I found that to be pretty fascinating that he mentioned it again. He didn't say the word habeas corpus, but he and this guy
In
inferred
a
from it like he
Trumpism,
just this
that's about as
what
close
he
as
what
you
he's
get.
talking about. But I found it so wild that the precedent setting time for this
Yeah.
was during the fourth turnings. And one of the things that Neil Howe, one of the authors of the book Fourth Turning, one of the things he says regularly now on YouTube streams he's on and podcasts where he's a guest and even his own podcast that he does and he does these big. He works for a big Wall Street kind of firm, but it's not like a hedge fund.
Yeah.
It's a firm that helps people make their own financial decisions and make
Okay.
investments and buy and sell stocks and stuff like that. But it's a big company. He works for them as a demographer and economist and all that kind of stuff.
Right.
But in all these different places where he speaks now, one of the things he says over and over and over again is the question is, can democracy survive a fourth turning? Meaning, can the rules of democracy work in a crisis era? They work fine for deciding how wide your sidewalk should be. They work fine for deciding how much we're going to pay, you know, X companies to build the next city building. They work fine for zoning. Democracy works fine for all those
Yeah.
things. but does democracy really work on things that really, really matter?
Right.
Like, what are the values of our country?
Right.
And that's an open question for him. And it seems to me that the answer so far is pointing to no.
Yeah, and it's because once you have democracy works great when you have institutions to support democracy, but when the institutions have all broken down, then there's nothing to keep it there. So you end up with a strong man of some sort. I mean, in
Yeah,
each fourth turning, you have a strong man, Lincoln, FDR, Washington.
right.
So that's
But
that's
not just the
natural.
institutions, but up until all those eras before, generally speaking, again, not speaking to the 10% fringe on either side of any issue, but generally speaking, up until the crisis era, everyone agrees upon what we're trying to do.
Sure.
But in the crisis era, we don't. We're
Right.
split pretty much 50-50. We're split pretty much 50-50 during the Depression era
Yep.
until Japan bombed World War or Pearl Harbor, and then we were unified behind that. And we were split obviously pretty much 50-50 during the Civil War.
Yep.
So when you have large percentages of the population deeply polarized against what the other half wants,
Right.
then how could democracy work? Because voting doesn't solve problems. You
Yeah.
can't change people's hearts with voting.
Yeah, yeah. And that's exactly it. So you have whether in this era that we've been in since World War II, it's been more sort of physical institutions and government institutions. But prior to that, there were social institutions where everybody had a certain level of agreement, a majority agreement on what's right and what's wrong. And when
Yeah,
you have differing views on such basic things as right and wrong, and is a person a human or not during the Civil War? Yeah, you can't really vote. I mean, they tried that with a 3/5 resolution, but that
right.
didn't work out too well either.
Yeah. Well, I found that to be pretty fascinating. And another thing I saved for us to talk about today, and we can just kind of go through this pretty quickly, but um, something happened where Europe made this grand proclamation that they had um, solved their energy problem with like alternative sources of energy. Right? They shut down nuclear, they got rid of their coal plants, and like
Yeah.
they're all green energy. And then within like 2 weeks, they had this massive brownout that they were on the verge of a massive catastrophic blackout.
Yeah.
Like they were on the verge of, I don't understand this stuff. They're talking in the power grid in hertz and things like that. I don't understand most of the stuff, but um, if it would have hit zero point 0.2 hertz more in whatever direction it was going from the mean, it would have triggered major emergency actions. Like
Oh, wow.
the system would have shut down.
Yeah.
Like the entire power grid would have shut
Oh, my
down
word.
because it would have been out of balance past the threshold that's in the tolerance that they
Right.
allow. And so I just found it fascinating that here we make this grand proclamation like, "Aha, we did it!" And within like 2 days or 2 weeks or whatever it was, it almost had a catastrophic failure. Zero conversation about this at all. We
Yeah.
were lots of conversation about the aha ta-da kind of thing.
Right.
Zero conversation about how close we came to a catastrophic failure.
Well, and that's one of the things in a fourth turning era. What you're going to find, I think, is that there's the things people focus on change pretty significantly. Because a while back it was like everything was green and carbon. You don't hear people even talking hardly about carbon anymore. Now, 3 Mile Island is opening back up here in the
Yeah,
U.S. There's
yeah,
another one. I can't remember where it's in Pennsylvania, opening up the nuclear power plants. So I mean, you've got people they're turning on a dime. The same thing happened with Germany and their economy. They've been a pacifist nation. They haven't been able to go into debt. They have that debt break thing going on, and all of a sudden a few things happen and JD Vance makes them upset, and boom, their entire cultural imperative has changed overnight.
yeah.
And that's again more fourth turning kind of behavior.
Yeah, and then there was another story that I saved. This is from a guy who is not a Trump fan at all, but he's somebody. He's I would call him a pragmatist, but very much not a Trump fan. So
Yeah.
he's kind of in this weird space where he doesn't like Trump, but he's also aware that like we have to do something,
Yeah.
right? And so one of the things he says here is he's talking about entitlement programs, right? And he said he posted something about he made a statement that entitlement programs are failing, and he was questioned on that. Like, how could you say why? How could you say they're failing? What makes you say they're failing? And so I'm going to read his response. Social Security was formed as a safety net, but not for the whole of society. Originally, there were 42 contributors to each beneficiary. So during the Depression, we had 30%, 25 to 30% unemployment.
Right.
Some people were in really hard times, very dire straits, didn't have food, shelter, clothing, that kind of stuff. So those people got Social Security, but 48 people, working people or wealthy people, paid into the system for that one person to get help.
Right.
Now it has 2.8 contributors for each beneficiary. So when you and I talk about how over time things get bastardized and corrupted and become dysfunctional and things like that, we oftentimes don't have math to put behind it.
Right.
I thought this was a good example of, like, there's actual math behind this stuff that, I don't know all this stuff. I don't have these statistics memorized, but that shows how far the intent of Social Security went from when it was first drawn up to what it is now.
Well, in Social Security, when it started, I think we got to remember, and you're just alluded to this, it was an insurance program more than it was Gesundheit. It was an insurance program, not a pension program. In a lot of other countries, they have pension programs. They call them, in Europe, they're called pensioners. We don't call Social Security recipients pensioners here, but basically it's turned into a pension program from an insurance program. Insurance exists to backstop you when your normal resources in life don't are under threat from something. So it's not designed to be your main income. But for all of us now, it's like, I get my statements every year. If you retire at 62, it's going to be this. 65, it's going to be that. It's a retirement program now, which was never meant to be in the first place. So that's where I think that's where fourth turnings come from. Is you start off with great organization and great intended systems and structures so that your society is better off than it was before, and eventually they become corrupted and bastardized and just not fit for
band-aided and patched together and pulled apart because of competing priorities and competing politicians who have competing needs, whether they're selfish or good or not good or whatever. They start picking them apart and changing them and altering them over time, and they just don't work. So
and
one of the things you and I've talked about is,
in those situations, bureaucracies begin to exist for their own sake, not for their purpose. And that's in the beginning, I would say in the 50s and 60s, in particular, the bureaucracies that were put in place existed for purpose, not just for self-perpetuation. But to a great extent now, a lot of what's being cut there are what we're talking about are not the benefits to society that were intended going away, but we're talking about, well, what are all these government workers going to do that were just fired? We can't make them lose their job. Nothing about the intended purpose of their job or the things they were doing that are beneficial.
Yeah, and then you throw in the efficiency factor. So back in what I don't know if it was 1932 or 1933, wherever Social Security was created, I can't remember what year it was, but it was somewhere back in that time.
Yeah.
So there's 42 contributors for each beneficiary. And I don't know the math on this, but I'd be willing to argue that it was a whole lot more efficient, meaning less bureaucrats had to touch a thing for the recipient to get the check.
Sure.
So if you take the combination of going from 42 contributors to 2.8, and then you throw in the inefficiency that's been built up over time of the bureaucracy just growing and growing and growing and growing, and how many people have to touch that and process that and take the data from over here to over there, both on the contribution side and the distribution side. I mean, we're talking two completely different systems.
Yeah. And it's collapsing under its own weight, and it can't.
Right.
I mean, and the problem that I think we have then is that these entitlement programs are untouchable, and nobody wants to touch them. I mean, there are honest people who say we have to fix these, but they're nowhere near the halls of power, and and even if they say it on TV, it's not going to get done until it's an actual existential crisis.
Yeah. And I think that's as we go along through this, it just keeps proving to me more and more and more. Now, I obviously have bias because I've already kind of bought into this concept, but as we go further and further along, it reinforces to me that the fourth turning is a real thing. The pendulum theory is a real thing where we continue to get bloated, inefficient, things come apart, they get corrupted, they get band-aided, they get whatever, and then they stop being functional. We go through this period where it's just chaos, which is where we're at now. There's no clear direction. We got 4 competing factions in the federal body or legislative body trying to do their thing, but we're not really making traction. We're just doing a bunch of stuff, not really getting anywhere yet.
Right.
And we keep kicking the can down the road, and we don't have a clearly defined threat. We have a whole bunch of supposed threats, and I say supposed, I don't mean that they're not real. I mean, just each camp has its lot of, here's the threats we need to be paying attention to, but not one of those yet has really come out to be one that everyone buys into.
Right.
So until we have that, and until we have some kind of unification on what the hell we need to do to overcome that threat,
right,
I think we're just going to continue to be in this like churning phase where we're just doing a bunch of stuff and not really making any traction.
Yeah, and that's the history of each of the previous fourth turnings. I mean, so in the original, American Revolution, you got the tax issue. We don't like having British soldiers stay in our homes. That's an issue. You got all these annoyances, but there wasn't one centralized thing until there was. And
Right.
at that point, and the same thing's true in the Civil War. Well, look, you can't tell us what to do, Lincoln. We're separate sovereign states. You can't do that. And but what about human rights? I mean, so you got separate issues. They congeal ultimately into one, or there's a congealing event such as Pearl Harbor or Fort Sumter being attacked. Just the various things that happen, and that's the spark that takes it and unites it all.
Yeah, I don't have every month that passes, I have less clarity what that thing is going to be. I don't. There's a whole bunch of contenders, but there's no front runner for me yet.
Well, yeah, and I don't know if you heard this or not, but another potential in that was India and Pakistan, both nuclear powers, are on the brink of war again. So, what happens if there's a limited nuclear exchange between Islamabad and Mumbai or something? What happens then, or Delhi? I mean, so that. It's kind of like, I don't know if you remember the movie War Games with Matthew Broderick back in the 80s. There was the thing that finally convinced the Whopper computer that you should do something different, like a nice game of chess, was it gamed out every possible scenario in a nuclear war. And it came to the conclusion, interesting, the only good conclusion or the only way to win this game is not to play it in the first place. Would you like a nice game of chess? So that is the fourth turning scenario, although the fourth turning is an inevitability. It's not a game. You can't just set it aside and go play chess, because it's everybody's lives and it's the lives of nations in the world.
Yeah. I think one of the front runners for me would have to be, will there be sovereign countries, or is there going to be a collective global entity that kind of decides stuff, like some version of the WTF or WTO or WEF or like whatever.
WTF. I'll go for the WTF. I think that one would be the only one that could.
Actually, if you combine the WEF and the WTO, you do get WTF. So I don't think I'm too far off base on that.
Yeah, that's right. That's what everybody's seeing in the end of it anyway.
Yeah. See, but it does feel like there's this force that you and I have talked about, this kind of, what did the Yuri Brezhnev called it, the global communist conspiracy.
Sure,
I think is the phrase that he used.
Yeah.
It does feel like that's a factor. How much of a factor, I don't know. And one of the things that points to that for me is the Epstein stuff.
Oh yeah.
The Epstein, we're 3.5 months into this presidency now, and like Trump or not, he's delivered on many of the things he said he would do. Yeah. Like tariffs or not, he's doing tariffs.
Yeah.
Like a closed border or not, he's closing the border.
Yeah.
Like,
yeah.
Whether you like these things or not, it's happening. He released the JFK files.
Right.
I don't know if there's still some secret documents that weren't really. I wouldn't know that kind of stuff. But one of the things that's glaring that stands out is the Epstein stuff.
Yeah.
That there has not been any movement on that. And then what was it, a week or two ago, one of the most prominent victims, or alleged victims, I guess, committed suicide, which, okay, that
well, there's
that already
like, there's been 3 of them. 3 of the victims committed suicide. And I look at that and I was reading, I was reading about that, and I'm like, this is, I mean, I can't imagine what she went through. I can't imagine what any of them went through. I don't,
No.
there's no way for me to connect with that. Um, but three of them now at this point have committed suicide. I mean, there's more to this story, and we don't know.
But the part I'm paying attention to, and not dismissing that, obviously, that's horrible. I didn't know that there was three. I thought there was just
Yeah.
the one. But
No.
is that this is a glaring area where Trump has not been able to make any progress,
Right.
any meaningful
Right.
progress at all in doing the thing he said he would do.
Right.
And part of me, I'm torn between the in my mind, the most likely reasons are he's not capable. There's forces greater than our government at play here that are not allowing this,
Right.
or he can't for
Right.
whatever reason, and it could be, like Mike Benz, the guy that we dissected his 45-minute video a
Yeah.
few months back. His theory is that there's so many countries involved in this.
Yeah.
That if you reveal what happened there, and you find out that Israel may have been involved, or Saudi Arabia may have been involved, or other who knows who else might have been involved.
Yeah.
A couple things happen. First of all that stuff gets revealed, and everyone is like super skeptical of every government now.
Right.
But also, they're in this kind of, if it's true, I don't know if it's true. If it is true that all these it's a multinational force that created Epstein and his island and created a thing to blackmail folks. Many countries were involved in that. If that's how it went down, if you're the country that rats out your friends, it's no different than being in the mafia and turning state's evidence.
Sure.
There's consequences for that. If the United States was a player and then turns state's evidence basically and reveals all the secrets, well, those countries won't trust the United States anymore on things that really do have consequences and really do matter as far as intelligence gathering and things like that. We could find ourselves as like not having access to it. And how perverted and how screwed up is that, Dave, if that's the situation?
Well, and and again, I don't have any inside information. My sense of it is, my gut feeling is that is exactly why we haven't seen that. Because I think, when Trump says, I'm going to do this, I'm sure he had the best of intention, in saying that. I don't think he was, because Trump has no filter. He says whatever comes to mind. I'm sure that was his intention, but probably afterwards, he probably didn't know. And again, this is all speculation, completely 100%.
Yeah.
But he might have not known, and then people come to him and say, 8 world leaders were on the island, and these people and these people, all these powerful people, and if you do this, you're just going to blow up the entire world system. And he's like, well, yeah, I guess I better.
And here's the 16 countries who conspired together to make this thing a reality, to extort, exploit, make people vulnerable to gather intelligence.
Right.
And we were one of the 16. And if you reveal, like, the other 15 are going to be mad as hell at you.
Right. Well, in what sort of puts the icing on that cake for me was, for a long time, one of the favorite memes you'd see popping around on Facebook and other places is Epstein didn't kill himself.
Yeah.
I mean, the fact that the
Christmas ornament one was my favorite, I think.
Which one?
The Christmas tree ornament.
Oh, yes. Yeah, exactly.
They sold Christmas tree ornaments that were a picture of him. Yeah, that was I think that was my favorite of all those.
Well, I mean, if you think about it, so we've, everybody's like scratching their head. How could this have been? I mean, we have surveillance equipment. He was on, how could this have even been? And it never got fully explained or investigated to anybody's satisfaction. There's no plausible explanation for this. Yeah, so that's kind of puts the icing on that cake, and it does reveal the something deep and dark about the whole global system. So yeah, I'm sure that's what it is.
Well, and not just the global system, but let's, and again, this is all speculation. I think there's a there. I don't know what the there is.
Yeah,
but there's a reason this is happening. I firmly do believe that. I don't have the first clue what it is. There's lots of contenders, no front runner, right?
Yeah.
But also, so take out the part about us being the one who turns state's evidence against the other however many countries there are, and us being the one who disrupts the global order as far as how countries get along with each other.
Right.
But what would the citizens of that cohort of countries think about their government?
Oh, yeah.
I mean, that is you want to talk about a destabilizing event. I mean, holy smokes, Dave. I don't know what you could do. Again, you and I didn't even want to think about what those women went through. Like, I can't even imagine what those women went through.
Yeah.
And to find out that your government, along with 8, 10, 15 other governments, put that together.
Right.
I mean, you would lose all faith in your government. And if that happened in large swaths of the global population, holy smokes, you talk about a change of direction globally.
Well, I mean, those are the things that revolutions are built on. When everyone completely loses faith, when it's like this just proves what we've said about the global elite for all this time, and so why do we trust anything that they do? You get a significant, even if not a majority of your population, you get a significant percentage of your population going down that road, and you're going to have some different form of government in a few years after a path of some sort.
Yeah, and then I find myself going, okay, now you're just tinfoil hat guy, Brian. Like, knock it off. You're going down a rabbit trail that's probably not very productive and whatever. But then I follow that up with, okay, but you don't want people speculating like this. You don't want people having conversations like you and I just had.
Right.
If you had the means to squash that, you would.
Right.
So why wouldn't you just squash it? And then you're left. Now you're right back to the beginning again. Well,
and now you're back.
And there's a reason for that.
Yeah, you're back to the whole. What's the plausible if there is a plausible explanation for Epstein's death? What is it?
Yeah.
I mean,
right.
It's in everybody's best interest to know that, because especially if you don't have the list of the black book of all the people that did their stuff on Epstein Island.
Yeah. If it's not this great conspiracy, then what is it? If there's a better explanation, it's in everyone's best interest to share it. They're not sharing it, so there's a reason. Now, again, I don't know what the reason is, but I know there's a reason.
Well, and by definition, at that point, it sort of does have to be some kind of conspiracy, because
it's going to be sinister, whatever it is. That's for sure.
It's got to be really bad, whatever it is, because otherwise, you like you say, you don't want to have people having these discussions like this and speculating, and it's been going on for years now, and nobody wants to put it to bed. So putting it to bed must be really, really bad.
Yeah,
that's crazy.
Yeah, it's one of the I don't spend a lot of time thinking about that, because it's just too dark for a place. I don't even like thinking about that kind of stuff.
Yeah.
But I gotta say, it's one of those perpetuating things that's just not going away.
Yeah.
People want to know.
Yeah.
This is one of those few things that has been hanging on for whatever it's been, like 6, 7, 8 years now, whatever it's been since all that stuff started coming to light. This it's not going anywhere.
Right.
This is going to have to be resolved at some point in the next 3 to 5 years. Like that. I don't think people are going to just grow tired of this. It's too dark. It's too sinister. It's too horrible.
I suspect the way it will be resolved, again, I don't know, prognostication. I suspect the way it'll be resolved is after the fourth turning, you've got a new order that emerges from that, and the old order then is not fully invested, or the new order is not fully invested in the old order, so therefore it can examine things we can look at things in the Depression era, in the late 1800s, and we can examine those as them and they, not as us and we.
And you can scapegoat them because we've already decided they were bad.
We've crossed the threshold. So I suspect this kind of thing, what we're talking about, specifically Epstein and all that, and it probably goes a lot deeper than just Epstein and his island, and it probably goes a lot deeper than that, and that will probably be resolved in terms of at least what we know about it in the first turning next time. So 20 years.
That would make sense, because it seems like dealing with it now is too costly. Whatever for whatever reason, it's going to cost too much. Not in dollars, but in loyalties or beliefs in
trust.
Governments and trust, all that. All that stuff. All that stuff is at stake. All right. Well, as we mentioned in the beginning, we're trying to explain to future generations what this moment in time is like. If you think there's something we got right, we'd love to hear about it. If you think something we got completely wrong, we'd like to hear about that too. Dave and I are sharing our perspective, but we'd love to get feedback from everyone else. And you tell Kenny G what you think we're on point about and what we're not. You can do that by going to unsilentpodcast.com, or Rumble has a great comment section. You can leave your remarks there. Until next time, this is Dave and Brian signing off.
See you next week.
Do you want to be unsilent? Make your voice heard on our social media channels and share where you think we got it right or wrong. Go to unsilentpodcast.com for social links so you can join the discussion.